Hello explorers and welcome to another video. Today we are going to talk about Java. Java 16. It's that time of the year. We have a new Java release that has gone into ramp down, so all the features are decided and now they are just testing it to see that everything works just fine. And this Java release will be released in 21.03.16, so in March. And I will call this the Open with Power. And it's a release where they take a lot of things that I have worked on and ratify it, and also makes some of the internals of Java much better. So let's dig into the different JEPs and talk about what's in this Java release. So first off, we have the JEP 338. This is the Vector API and it's an incubator, so it's just the starting phases. But the thing that they are working on here is mainly on CPU architectures, making the different operations available from Java. So you can run vector operations that will go directly to the CPU and be much faster than running them in Java code. So this is a way to make vector operations much faster on the architectures that support it. But this API also have a Java implementations for those that don't have that support. So you can use this API anywhere and it will get a speed boost on those CPUs that has support for this. Next up, we have the JEP 347, and this is enable some of the feature of C++ 14 language in Java. So now Java is mainly written in C++ or C86, and that is a very old language, very good of course, but there is a lot of new interesting features that you can use in newer C that you can now that they have started to use in Java. So we might see a little bit of a performance boost in the next version. Next up, we have another internal thing. They have gone from Mercurial to Git and also migrated their code to GitHub. So now you can find the OpenJDK repository on GitHub and see when they are working on it, and also see all the issues and talk to the developers there, which I think is a very good step for openness. And I think the Mercurial is a very good source engine to handle your versioning, but as there is such a huge amount of people using GitHub at the moment, I think it's a good step for them to migrate over there to where everyone else is writing their code. So this is a good thing for openness. Next up, we have the JEP 376. And this is the concurrent thread stack processing, and this is for the ZGC, and it's an extra implementation of the ZGC that makes things much faster with a lot more threads. And I'm not going to go into exactly what it does, but just as it's implemented, it will give you later stop times when you're doing GC with the ZGC. And the whole point of this garbage collector is to have zero latency, or as little latency as possible. And this is another step in that direction. And if you have the need for this very performant garbage collector with less latency, then look into this one. I'm not going to go more into detail with this. Next up, we have the 380, and this is the Unix-Domain socket channels. And in the last release, we got a new API to handle sockets in or a new implementation of the socket API in Java, and also new implementation for using different network calls within Java. And this is another extension where you can actually use the native Unix sockets that you can talk to processes within a Unix system. So this is support for that in the new API. So that's a very good thing. If you are writing many applications that needs to communicate, you can use this sockets. Next up, we have some ports. Java will now be ported to the Alpine Linux, which uses Muzzle instead of glibc, which is a very different architecture, but it's pretty much a Linux that is very much smaller than the regular Linux, and it's usually used in Docker environments to have a really small Docker image so it's fast to boot up. So now you have a very performant Java engine that you can put on a very small Alpine Linux and run in Docker, which is very nice. I will look into this and probably migrate some of my work into the Alpine Linux port. And we also have an Arch64 Windows port, so we can run applications much more performant on Windows, which also is a very good sign. Next up, we have 387, the Elastic Metaspace, and this is an improvement to that. It was implemented earlier in 2015, I think the release was done. And before we had a class space where we saved all the class metadata within a space, and we had to say how much memory that space could take up, and we had crashes because we didn't have enough space when we used a lot of classes. And then they had another implementation of this, and now they are doing improvements to this Elastic Metaspace in order to do faster garbage collections on this metaspace in order to use the memory more efficiently. Next up, we have the 389, which is the foreign linker API, and I talked about that in the earlier video of Java 15. And this is an API to link to native code, and it's a new API to do that much more conveniently. And this is still an Incubator API, so you're still working on how this API should be shaped. So if you have any suggestions, it's a good time to talk to developers. Next up, we have warnings for value-based classes, 390. And there is a lot of value-based classes already, and you can create your own value-based classes. But they are mostly thinking about those that are almost native classes that could go to value-based. For instance, the int class or the double class or the float class, for instance. Those are already very close to the native counterparts, and they want them to be value-based classes. And in order to do that, they have put in warnings if you are using the constructors of these classes instead of other functions, because that is something that they will remove from these classes as they are doing them to value-based classes. So this is just a step in the right direction, and I believe that they put these warnings in so you can migrate without too much of a headache if you have code that uses these incorrectly. Next up, we have 392, which is a packaging tool. And this is a packaging tool to take your native Java VM and your application and package that in a neat packet for different operating systems. So you can get a native package MSI for Windows, or a native package for Mac or Linux, and just install them right off and get them as an installed package in that system with all the features that entail. So you can install on Windows, get an icon, and then go into the system and remove applications, and it should show up there as well, so you can uninstall it. So this is a very nice convenience feature for those who write native applications in Java and want to package them up in a neat package and send them out to their customers. Next up, we have the foreign memory API, Access API, and this is the third incubator, so they have had a lot of discussion around this one. And this is a way to natively access memory. If you just in Java say, I want this chunk of memory on your in your memory bus and I want to use it for my purposes. And doing that in a safe and efficient way is something that is quite hard. So I understand that they will take some time before they actually ratify a good API for this, but it's still in the works, and they have another incubator here, another suggestion on how this should look. Next up we have 394, which is the pattern matching for instance of. And this is a very nice convenience feature. So here we have, for instance, this equals function, and we have a return statement where we do an instance of and assign a variable, in this case other, in this statement before we use it in the and statement afterwards. So this will compact your code a bit, and you can use instance of declarations in order to set variables. So that's a very nice way to work with, and it's also scoped to the block. So if you have a if statement, for instance, with an instance of, and you set a variable there, it will only be visible within that block. In this case, the block is just what comes after on this line, but the same applies to this example. So this is a really nice convenience feature. Next up, we have 395. Records, and this is records, the last implementation. They are now final in your Java implementation. I believe that the matching of instance of is also native in Java now. So now these are features that are in 16. You can use them. They are ready for production. I don't think we need to talk much about that. I have talked about it a lot in earlier videos. But records is a good way to just create a bunch of data and then use them in other situations. Next up, we have strongly encapsulate JDK internals by default. So I think earlier we had a lot of warnings about don't use the unsafe internals of Java, don't use the Sun Java classes and so on. There have been a lot of talk about these internal classes that really are used inside of the engine, and if you are using them, you can actually make the engine crash. So they want to encapsulate it even more, and in this Java 16 they are internals by default. You cannot use them. So that's a really good thing going forward. So we have a more safe environment to work with in our Java virtual machine. Next up, we have the sealed classes, and this doesn't really make sense in this open with power that I talked about earlier, because this is the opposite. Here is something where you as a developer, if you see this in an API, for instance, or if you see this in a module that you are thinking about using, and somebody had created a sealed class, this indicates that they are not really done with this. It can't be extended. They don't know exactly how to implement it, so it can be reused. So in this case, you say that something is sealed, and the only thing you can implement by this is a circle, a rectangle, and a square. There is no other shapes. So this is a way for a developer that wants to create something that could not be reused later on. I don't really see the reason for this one, and if I see someone using this one, I will probably not use that code, because I will not be I don't think it's safe to use it, because they have only thought about these specific cases. What else have they missed? So I think this is a very strange feature. So this is what's in the new Java release 16. I hope that you found this video interesting. I hope that you learned something today. If there is some feature that you are really excited about, leave a comment about that down below. If you haven't subscribed to this channel yet, please do that. If you like this video, give it a like, share it with your friends and colleagues, and I really hope to see you in the next video.